Welcome to the April 11th UDL Implementation Trials Mentors User Group Network meeting. The agenda is linked in the UDL Forward Community Trials Mentor User Group.
Welcome. This is our April meeting of the UDL Implementation Trials User Group.
Thank you. We thought we'd connect with getting some input from you through a Foursquare connection. So if you click on the link in the agenda, you will get this Foursquare connection. This is a great way to reflect and kind of know where you've been and where you're going, but also it's really helpful for us as we think about trainings next year, user group meetings, and supporting this work. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for all your feedback, seeing the connection, the Foursquare, and knowing some of the barriers, some things that you would like to know upfront about the trials, all your takeaways and next steps are very helpful. In the spirit of giving everybody a voice and choice, we'll ask each group to share out some of their discussions, and you can pick any of the four squares to focus on or all of four squares. It's completely up to you.
I can summarize, since I was the note taker, I have a good idea of how they kind of work together. One of the things, a couple of our people had started the process a little bit late for a variety of reasons, and so that to some extent was a barrier. However, what was learned was that once there was a process and a procedure in place, getting things calendared was really helpful. And then we also talked about the level of discussions with the people in the trials has been really, really in depth. Because they're really focused on what the students are experiencing and what the decisions you make actually impact the learner. And so that has essentially deepened the conversations. So those were some of the highlights. But yeah, just that calendaring and like getting it into the process, getting into the rhythm of the process is really important.
Awesome. Thanks, Missy.
Had a great conversation in a group. I will focus kind of on the key learnings and takeaways. I think the biggest thing that we sort of learned from this process was, especially being new, we were so rigidly following the amazing artifacts and evidence and templates and tools that you had, and almost to the point where we were focusing more on that than what we were getting out of it. And come January, we sort of came to this realization that, and Kristen, maybe you can back me up, like we felt like we were maybe doing things wrong, but we felt like we were doing the right things. So that shift from really using these tools as a guide, not necessarily a firm checklist, was really something that I believe we're going to take away, because our group really had a strong discussion about the fact that we don't want this work to focus on completing the tasks that are listed. We want this to focus on the output of the work. So when we finally got comfortable enough saying, we might not have done it exactly how this roadmap said, but this is what's best for our teachers, that's sort of how we, what we're going to take away from this process this year.
I think that would be true for any team, Lance. One of the hopes that we have is that the tools provide a framework for you to work within, but knowing that every district context is going to be a little different. Some of the trials teams, some of the teachers are collecting their own data. Some teachers have the mentors come in and collect the data. So it's going to look different, but it definitely is empowering to think about the process being customized or really fit to your teams, and the tools and the framework being a guide to help you do that.
Yeah, and Lance, your experience, or the whole Denmark experience, has been repeated with many of the districts that we've worked with, where we have such a rigid sense of complying. I mean, we're all good people. We want to comply with the things that are told to us. But this is really an adjustable process that to be picked up and applied, we want to be the yes people. Yes, let's make it happen, because those discussions that happen and changing our focus from the adult practice to the impact those practices have is I think the magic in these trials, really. Well, one of the things that I'm wondering about is when I see some folks saying that their next step is to continue the trials, I'm curious what the thoughts are about what that looks like for you, and wondering if you intend to participate still in the trials grant project with us next year, because we'll be continuing.
I'll just say from my perspective, year one is always that learning year where you kind of sink and swim and float and whatever. This meeting and the conversation, the honest conversation I had in my group really kind of made me comfortable with everything. And that is just inspiring for me then to move forward. Like, we all sort of also need that you're doing the right thing sort of pat on the back, if you will. And I feel like I have that personally, but I feel like what Denmark is doing would receive that pat on the back. So it almost is like just filling the tank up with gas. And I think that, I had a discussion with one of my teachers who I was observing yesterday about how weird it is to teach kids how to engage in a discussion. Not about, ELA content, but like, how do you teach kids what a discussion is? So I feel like we're really in need of our teachers intentionally supporting positive instructional strategies in their classroom that's just good teaching. And I feel like knowing what we know now and knowing where we're going to go would be silly for us to kind of drop out of it, because I feel like we just got the momentum that we really need to move forward. So I hope my team feels the same way, that we would move forward. I hope to bring a couple more people in on it and just kind of spread the madness, if you will.
Well, what I will say is that we want the showcase is an opportunity for everyone to, kind of pat each other on the back for the work that we engaged in this year. Joe and I feel so honored that you joined us for this journey, because we can build the tools and we can be, provide the opportunities to network and the training and technical assistance or support. But if no one's engaged in the work, the tools don't impact students.
So again, we have the checklist for you so you understand what we need. I did not go back through and see if people brought things to us. One of the more important things that we have to report to the DPI is the number of students that are impacted by these trials. So if you haven't filled out each of the baseline indicator students in baseline trial 1, trial 2, trial 3, no matter how many trials you did, that's a super important part of how we demonstrate our reach into the students in Wisconsin that are receiving the benefits of the money that is provided to us to bring this grant activity to you. So let's move on to the UDL resource roundup. And this is just us share shopping the tools that we decided to use from the mentor toolkit or the community or the user group that were helpful in the trials process for us. So we can share, how did we, like Lance said, how did we take whatever framework or tool was their template, and how did we make it our own? Because seeing other people's examples are a way that we can refine our own work. Multiple thought partners and multiple examples can inspire us to improve whatever we're doing this year to make it better for everybody participating in the trials next year.
Some of the questions I've used when bringing together a team, I don't feel comfortable sharing the agenda with the team I'm working with, just because that's what we've been using to communicate back and forth with each other. And there are some notes that I don't feel should be shared with the world.
Yep,
if that's okay. So I'm looking at, so this was a semesterized roadmap. The team that I met with, we started in semester 2. So we're looking at, beginning the end of January. And what we started with during our kickoff was asking folks to talk about what they geek out about. So for me, it was to get a little bit of a sense as to who the folks were, but also for them to think about what does it mean when you're really engaged as a learner, that feeling. So we talked about that. For example, one of believe it or not, right, the biology teacher, like he geeks out about coral reefs, for example. And we talked about so what do you how do you learn when you're geeking out? What are the things you do? And it helped us really begin to process what it feels like from a learner's perspective, but also what are the different ways that you yourself kind of engage in the learning. And that was really helpful because then as I've been working with the team, I will share different things with this person about coral reefs, or what did it feel like when you went scuba diving, off the coast of, I don't know, the Great Barrier Reef or whatever it might be. So that was really helpful at the beginning for them to kind of have a mindset as to when you're engaged in learning yourself, what does that feel like? When we began to debrief about trial 1, I wanted them to be reflective in what they've learned thus far. So it was what has stuck with you since the last time we met? What are you beginning to bring into your everyday practice? Not just when, crazy CISA lady is on site, right? So what are you doing yourself that is just becoming kind of how you rock and roll? When we got into planning for trial 2, I asked them, what do you now know about engagement that you didn't know before? What are you beginning to look for? How are you redefining that term? And we also talked a little bit about how are you helping your departments, because this is at a high school, begin to think about engagement in a different way. So it was really, we're talking about your own practice. How are we beginning to define engagement in a different way and kind of expand how you talk about it? Because I'm looking at Missy, right? Everything is linguistic, how we talk about learning design, how we talk about our students is critical. And then the last, the trial. So when we debriefed trial 2 and are planning for trial 3, we talked about what have you learned about reflection for you within your own practice, right? So trial 2 is really about student reflection, and I wanted them to think about how has reflection become part of your own process over the course of the day, over the course of a class period, and really thinking about not only looking at student reflection, but also us as, the lead learning designers. How are you using reflection in relation to what you're seeing in the classroom? So a little bit of a different take on some of those questions when I'm meeting with folks, but they seemed to help them reground themselves in what we've learned previously and get them ready for what we're going to talk about next.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing those questions. I think they're inspiration for others, but I also think this is an opportunity for us to say, let's take some of those critical questions and put them in the mentoring prompts in the toolkit. So they live beyond our discussion today. And that really is what I hope for with the showcase as well.
Remind us of the resource also in there in the UDL Forward community, but Angela Stockman's workshop that she did with us in the fall is in UDL Forward, and she talks a lot about documentation and grabbing, images, and even if you record your voice to reflect on the process, and then using all of that documentation to enhance the reflection piece. So again, I'm wondering if my learning and thinking about reflection is evolving into reflection and documentation. Because I think that the documentation it makes the reflection visible, it makes the learning visible. So I just want to remind us that we have that, and it's sort of an area that I think deserves more exploration from us too.
I felt that there was a need with the teachers I was working with to kind of help further explain the academic data piece, because they were asking a lot of questions kind of related to just like how do they, I mean, they're assessing and collecting information, but I think they just were struggling to understand like what we were looking for. So I just made this slideshow specifically related to academic data. And I tried to remind them, sorry, apparently there's effects on that. I tried to remind them just about the PDSA cycle, clear learning targets, and then I'm working with social studies and science. So I wanted to give them specific examples. And so that's nothing special. So I just took this from the slideshow that was kind of created the template just to highlight a few things. And then I took some things that they had told me that they wanted to kind of use. And then I pulled disciplinary literacy standards from Common Core, which isn't what we use in Wisconsin anymore, I know, but and then I gave them some examples of like what that actually could look like using the disciplinary literacy standards to kind of look like, so this was for, like I said, social studies. And so they were going to do some things with like primary and secondary sources and reading different documents. So that's kind of, I felt like they needed some help and examples. And then I just showed them like where it would go, because this template has been very tricky for them. I don't think it is tricky actually, but I think that they've just struggled to understand kind of where things go. So I just wanted to show them like where that the academic piece would go as an example. And then I just showed them kind of more, examples as well. And showed them kind of where to find the disciplinary standards.
Yes.
And then these are links to information from DPI, specifically on disciplinary literacy and social studies, and then the Common Core disciplinary literacy standards. And then I did basically the same thing for science. So they were looking at analyzing and interpreting data in tables. So again, I gave them some different examples based on the science disciplinary literacy standards. And then found something from Wisconsin again to tie it back to our state. And then linked again the science disciplinary literacy standard or information from DPI and the Common Core. So
that's really great. I bet that
really
was
wonderful.
Yeah, I bet that was super helpful for your teachers.
Yeah, hopefully. So
I think developing those academic criteria is one of the toughest things that teachers have to do. And it's funny how we all think we're observing things when we look at student work and when we're seeing students in the classroom, but when we have to get down to brass tacks and write down exactly what it is, the precision that we feel in our head is very imprecise compared to the precision we need if we want to write it down and communicate that to somebody else. So it helps us realize that we might not be as clear about what we really want to see in students' production that gives us the evidence we need to understand that they're making academic progress.
We have the slides, the make and take slides. And if you would be willing to, even add your slides to that for other folks to use as a reference or inspiration, they're lovely and wonderful. And it's really great to see how the process is interpreted and supported for different teacher teams.
Well, I'll share what I have. I just wanted to show you how we combine the process at Royal Oaks and Sun Prairie with their SLO. This was like the beginning process. I don't know if this is something
Mm-hmm.
you're interested in looking at, but what we did was created this. Can you see this? Okay, I'm not going to present it. Is it big enough for you guys? Just how it's all connected, right? So we have district goals and vision, we have Royal Oaks, their school, and then talking about kind of like a SMART goal for the implementation trials. And then we went
Uh-oh.
I just had this stuff set up for them and my computer is, there we
Uh-oh.
go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'll stop my video. It's kind of being glitchy, but anyway, so this was an example of engagement indicators. What I had them do, because I'm using the 5th grade example, but the 2nd grade team actually went through this, they had extra time. So what I wanted them to do is to really make sense of the engagement indicators, even though they're provided for us. So what do these rubrics, the numbers mean to them? So they went through that. Then 5th grade did this on their own. I don't know if they didn't put it in here, but they did it on their own. Then we went through and just like we were just talking about, that academic criteria is the hardest for them. So
Mhm.
coming up with a standard, taking a look at their standards, and they were just deconstructing their standards. So it was perfect timing for them. They had a really good understanding. And so they chose the standard from the 5th grade. And then how did that look in the rubric? So they deconstructed this standard into the rubrics for the criteria. And then they went into, okay, now we need to input our SLO into, what is it called, you guys? What are they using?
Frontline?
Frontline, thank you. So they had to put it into Frontline. So they made sense of that right here. So they were doing this double work combined together, which I loved. So then right away that day, they had put this up in Frontline. So they had all of that. They had they do a team PPG. And then I just had some other examples on the bottom here of, okay, now for trial 1, we're going to get our baseline data. Here's an example, and then trial 1 going into, and then I was going to add trial 2, trial 3, but total transparency, the timing of all, just finding the time for all of this. Some of the work has been done outside of us just sitting together and compiling it. But my goal was to have trial 1, trial 2, trial 3 all in here so that it was all combined together.
Mm-hmm. So as we always do, we try to make sure that we put aside time for you to do work that we're asking you to produce during the implementation trials process and grant project. So our next meeting together is going to be our MACE showcase. And we wanted to provide plenty of time for you to be able to be connected to us and connected to each other to be able to do some showcase preparation. On our agenda, we have a showcase preparation segment, and you'll see that we're giving you 50 minutes to work on that. The UDL implementation trials May showcase guidelines is there. But Michelle and I are here if you have questions about what that showcase presentation should include. We're happy to further answer those questions or to even help you think through what you want to include in your showcase presentation. All right, well, welcome back to Lana and Christine. We let everybody go a little bit longer because our closure is a quick checkout today. I'll put the after session mentor user group survey into the chat. So if everybody could take that.
And then we just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to hear about the structure of our next meeting date, which is the showcase. Just a reminder, it's 9 to 1, so that is a longer meeting. The meeting and the showcase will focus on the mentor presentations. One of the things that we're trying to encourage is folks to be there for the entire time, so everybody has an audience, but also folks can benefit from hearing from each team or each mentor. And we know that people's schedules can be turned upside down at the drop of a hat. So for some of you that have things scheduled or are experiencing conflicts, one of the things that we're encouraging is perhaps thinking about recording your presentations so that the group can still benefit if for some reason you have to step out or are unable to attend.